anyway, here we go. Right. So God's hidden call. We're going to look at the Megillah and Purim, of course, which is this week. But we still have a, hopefully, can you see that?
Not doing this week's Parsha then.
No, we're doing the Megillah this week.
Right, okay.
But we get Esther in a nutshell instead. So off you go.
Yeah. Haman was prime minister to the Persian Emperor Ahasuerus, whose dominion extended from India to Ethiopia. Endorsed by Ahasuerus, Haman's decree boded the physical destruction of every single Jew on the face of the earth. While the sage Mordecai rallied the Jews to prayer and repentance, his cousin, Queen Esther, engineered Haman's downfall at a private wine party to which she invited the king and the minister. She prevailed upon Ahasuerus to hang Haman and to issue a second decree, empowering the Jews to defend themselves against those who sought to destroy them. On the 13th of Adar, the day selected by Haman's Pur lottery, numerous battles were fought throughout the empire between the Jews and those who attempted to carry out Haman's decree, which was never actually revoked. The following day, Adar 14, became a day of feasting and rejoicing in celebration of the Jews' victory over their enemies. In the ancient walled capital, Shushan, where the battle went on for 2 days, the victory celebration was held on Adar the 15th.
One second. Okay. Carry on.
The Purim Celebration. Mordecai and Esther instituted that these... Sorry? The Purim Celebration. Mordecai and Esther instituted that these 2 days be observed for posterity as the festival of Purim. Adar 15 in walled cities and Adar 14 in unwalled towns, by public readings of the story of the miracle as recorded in the scroll of Esther, sending food portions to friends, giving gifts of money to the poor, and enjoying a festive meal accompanied with inebriating drink, recalling the fateful wine party at which Esther turned Ahasuerus against Haman. A time-honored Purim custom is for children to dress up and disguise themselves, an allusion to the fact that the miracle of Purim was disguised in natural garments. This is also the significance behind a traditional Purim food, the hamantash, a pastry whose filling is hidden within a 3-cornered crust. The day before Purim is the fast of Esther, in commemoration of the fast of Esther and her people as they prayed for God's salvation from Haman's decree.
It's interesting, by the way, thank you very much. Those that listen to the Halacha Shir in the morning, the fast of Esther, which we fast on Thursday, it's not mentioned explicitly in the Megillah. Fasting is mentioned generally, but not mentioned explicitly. The assumption is that they fasted because they were in a time of distress. Anyway, okay, so.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
I'm very, very confused. The relationship between Mordecai and Esther. Some say, and here is his cousin. Others say it was his niece. So
correct.
This seems to be changing.
So
could be both.
Views. Yeah, I think you can have both if you.
And I was told she was married to him.
Yes, well. I heard that as well.
So there is a view that says that. I think there's different opinions. One is that she was his cousin, one is that she was his niece, and it's definitely mentioned somewhere that she may have been married to him. You can marry your niece according to strict Torah law, and you can certainly marry your cousin, as people do. I don't know if it's recommended, but people do it. So I think the answer is yes, you're right, and you're right too. They're all different different views that are offered out of their relationship. Obviously very different depending which one you go with. Yes. So the confusion probably comes from the fact that they are all valid suggestions that are made.
Rabbi,
right, God's hidden call. What's hidden about God? Yeah.
Rabbi, what has always puzzled me about the story of Purim, though the walled cities, was it only Shushan and Jerusalem that are counted as walled cities, or were there others?
So in Halacha, we say it applies to any cities that were walled at the time of Joshua. I don't know if that's before or after the wall.
So
came
Jericho.
down. So we were just discussing this, whether probably, yeah. Interestingly, there's never been substantial Jewish settlement in Jericho. You may recall that when
But
they
it
had
was
the
a
peace
walled
plan, they did
city.
Gaza, Jericho first. It was
But it
until
was
the
a
wall
walled
came down.
city in the time of Joshua.
Yes,
Because it,
I think Safat also do Purim a day later. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there may be, we were talking about this the other night, I think there may be cities in Iran or Iraq. Most places though don't. So yes, it's a city that was.
How wide
would it,
I
also,
know
would
it's
it
in
also
Joshua Post.
include cities in walled cities of the time in other countries, such
Yes.
as in Rome or Greece?
If they were, yes. Not aware of any in Europe that celebrate a day later. Beryl, are you knitting? Right. I thought you were
Sally
waving
wants
your
to
hand.
ask something.
What are
Sally,
you asking me, Rabbi?
sorry? No, I thought you were putting your hand up. Sorry.
Oh no,
Sally
no.
has.
Oh no.
Sally, sorry, I can't see everyone at once because of the PowerPoint.
How wide, when we go to Israel now, the walled bit is David's citadel. So people who live outside that wall, where is the rest of the walls of Jerusalem? Because Jerusalem is not exactly tiny now. So how does that work as a walled city? Because the Jerusalem bits I know don't have a wall around them.
That's a
Never
good question.
did.
I think the answer to that, I think, is that, I mean, the other question you could say is certain parts of Jerusalem that are further out, like, I don't know, Ramot or Pisgat Zeh, they're not really part of sort of,
Well, that's why I'm asking.
what was
So if
probably
you live in
historical Jerusalem.
if you
So
live
I
in
don't know the
Harnof, does that count as being in a walled city? Is it inside the walls?
answer to that, but to the best of my knowledge, the municipality.
Right, okay.
So
Rabbi.
it's probably slightly.
Sally, where
open,
Michael
to
lives,
the best of my knowledge.
not far
Yeah.
from Donna, they count it. They're within that area because they celebrate Purim usually the next day.
Well, that's why I'm asking, because I
Yeah.
know, but there's no evidence of a wall in those areas.
yeah.
I just wondered, is there?
No, so I think right. So sorry, Pam, you're saying they still mark Shushan Purim, yeah?
Yes, it seems to be by
The city.
postcode. So, like
Yeah.
you said, it spreads out.
I think it goes by city. We do that quite a lot. I mean, as important as Shabbos is, if you actually think about it, it makes no sense that Oxford, Cardiff, Bristol, Reading have different times for candlelighting based on longitude and latitude, and yet Greater London.
You seized up.
We've lost you, Rabbi.
Which is, we have one time for London. So we
Yeah.
do kind of approximate things by city. We do that quite often.
I was just
interestingly.
curious.
Um,
Thank you.
Yeah, to the best of my knowledge, it's somewhat loose in its definition. So we know whose name does not appear in the Megillah, God's, right? Okay, so, and you probably heard some of this last night, you probably heard some of this before. So this is the Gemara, the Talmud in Chulin. Now, I'm going to ask someone to read in English. I'm going to read the Hebrew because the Hebrew's got all the puns in it. So who'd like to read the English?
I can read the English.
Anyone says?
I'll do it.
Go for it,
Okay.
please.
They also asked Rav Matana, from where in the Torah can one find an allusion to the events involving Esther? He replied to them that the verse states, "Then my anger shall be kindled against them on that day, and I will forsake them, and I will hide my face from them, and they shall be devoured, and many evils and troubles shall come upon them, so that they will say in that day, have not the evils come upon us, because our God is not among us? And I will hide, Haster Aster, my face on that day for all the evil which they shall have wrought, in that they are turned to other gods."
I was just trying to work out what Cedra this is. I think it's Kisam.
Deuteronomy.
The curses. Let me just check. Yeah, no.
Deuteronomy
so what is it,
31, 17, 18.
I'm just wondering what Cedra it is. I should know the answer to this. Let's just see. Oh no, so it's Vayelech. It's right at the end. Yes. So let's just, the Hebrew might make a little bit more sense here. So let me just get my
So if you can't understand it, it won't.
My tool for 1 second. All right. Right, I'm going to explain it. Okay, so the Hebrew says Esther. Let me just get my thingy 1 second. Let's make it a bit clearer. Try to do this with my spotlight. Here we go. Okay, so I don't know if that helps. Esther, right? The name Esther. Mina Torah.
From the Torah.
So from the Torah, Minayin, from where? In the last book in Tanakh is right at the end. Okay, you have Torah, you have the Chumash, the 5 books of Moses, the so-called Old Testament. You have the Nevi'im, the prophets, Ezekiel and Isaiah and Judges and Joshua and Kings. No, sorry. And then you have the Ketuvim, just things like the Tehillim, the Psalms, the 5 Megillas and so on. So apparently Esther's the last one that was canonized into that lot. So they asked the Talmud, where do we find a hint to the book of Esther in the Torah? And they said the answer is, it says in Devarim, in the Parsha of Vayelech, Va'anochi, and I, Haster. I've put those words bigger because it's like Esther. Esther means to hide. Stira means either a concealment or a contradiction. Those of you who, I don't know, get bombarded by charities may well have had charities called Matan Baseter, which means to give in secret, anonymously. So the Torah says, Vanochi haster astir. Sounds like Esther. I will hide my face from you. This is a negative. Right? God says that, as we quoted in English, there will come a time when my anger will be against them. I will forsake them. I'll hide my face from them. They shall be devoured, and evils and troubles shall come to them. And they'll say, have these not come to us because God is not amongst us? I will hide my face for all the evil which they have wrought. So God's concealment, whilst it's something we're quite used to in modern times, because we say we don't see God in the world in a revealed way like we did at Sinai and things like that, but God's concealment is something to be feared. So Talmud says that where do we find the book of Esther alluded to in the Torah? When it says there'll come a time when I'm angry with them and I will hide myself from them. I will conceal myself, basically. So Esther is one of only 2 books in the whole Tanakh which don't contain the name of God. And by the way, everything, of course, is Beshert. This week's Seder, of course, doesn't contain the name of Moshe, Tetzaveh, famously, right? Because later on, when it comes to the, as we know, when it comes to the golden calf, he says to God, if you won't save these people, then delete my name. I want no part of this. And God says, I will save them. But you know what? Because you're so holy, Moshe, I will make a token acknowledgement of your word. And the Parsha of Tetzaveh does not contain your name. It says you a lot. You will command them. You is Moshe. But it doesn't contain his name explicitly. Anyway, so there are 2 books in Tanakh which apparently don't contain God's name. I didn't know this. I just found this out. One is Esther. I don't know what the other one is.
The Apocrypha.
No, possibly. That's not officially part of Tanakh. That.
Judith, the one that's got the story of Judith.
Yeah, it's not a part of the official Tanakh. No, it's actually one of the other Megillas, believe it or not.
Oh, Shir Shirim.
Correct. I didn't realize this. Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, whilst the whole thing is a love poem about the relationship between God and the children of Israel, it doesn't mention his name explicitly, which is really interesting. I didn't know that. So you have 2 complete opposites. Shir HaShirim is this beautiful story and poem and allusion to allegory of the love between God and the Jewish people. The story of Purim is one of fear, ultimately. It ended well, but it didn't start well. Right? The whole story is one of fear of basically mass annihilation, and God is nowhere to be found. Right? Just to remind you what happened in the Megillah. Oh, sorry, here's the quote. Right. Who wants to read that? That's the quote from Devarim that we just said about the day will come when I will hide myself. Who would like to read that?
I'll read that, Rabbi.
Jeff.
Then my anger will flare up
Go
against
for it.
them, and I will abandon them and hide my countenance from them. They shall be ready to pray, and many evils and troubles shall befall them. And they shall say on that day, surely it is because our God is not out in our midst that these evils have befallen us. Yet I will keep my countenance hidden on that day, because of all the evil they have done in turning to other gods.
Familiar question. People say, where is God? Where was God during the Shoah? Where is Hashem? Why can't I see his hand or him? So the Torah predicts that there will come a time. It says it'll be down to us and our actions. But so with that background, when you have a story like Esther where the hand of God is hidden, at the end it may be miraculous and beautiful, but while it's going on, it's pretty scary stuff. If you think about it, you know, in the whole story of Esther, it doesn't say God came to Mordecai and told him this. God came to Esther and told her that. It's all very much seemingly an almost secular story, if you like. And it's the first reported example of an attempt at mass extermination of the Jews. We always say that, you know, even as tragic as the Shoah was, that the Sephardi Jewry were relatively unharmed by it. And one of the reasons we are dispersed around the world is that if we're persecuted in one place, we thrived in another. We know that Ahasuerus was pretty much the king of, you know, his empire was huge, and it seems like the entire Jewish nation basically lived under his rule. So it was an existential threat. Another interesting aspect of Purim also, I think Purim is the only Yom Tov that has no connection to the land of Israel or to our journey from Egypt. So Pesach, going out of Egypt, Shavuos, right, giving the Torah on the way through the desert to the land of Israel. Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, okay, I mean, whatever, that's slightly different, but they're tied in with the temple. Right? Sukkot, all connected to the land of Israel. Hanukkah, the temple. Right? Purim, completely in exile. Nothing to do with the temple, the Holy Land. Complete exile, basically. So there's a few aspects of that. Just to remind ourselves what it says in the Megillah. Right? After Haman's maneuverings, who would like to read number 3?
I'll read it if you like.
Any volunteers?
According,
Go for it.
accordingly, written
Yeah.
instructions were dispatched by couriers to all the king's provinces to destroy, massacre, and exterminate all the Jews, young and old, children, women, on a single day, on the 13th day of the 12th month, that is, the month of Adar, and to plunder their possessions.
Right, it's quite clear it's mass extermination. I think it's the first time in history we faced a proper, I mean, Pharaoh also, but, you know, Amalek was horrible. You know, it says they preyed on the weary and the tired and the stragglers. But in the times of Purim, it was an attempt to wipe out the Jewish nation. So, meanwhile, where's God? Doesn't even get mentioned. It does say that they prayed and they fasted. It does mention that. Does it say they prayed actually? One second.
It said Esther
It says they
told them
fasted.
to
It
fast.
mentions fasting, definitely. So, with all of this going on, where's God? Where's faith? So, there's an interesting line. They actually made a song about this line, which I thought, they run out of ideas for songs. They'll make songs out of any line in Davening or the Megillah. So there's a song. It's quite goes with me a day I'm like kind of a sort of slow song, and those words mean, who knows, maybe it's for this reason that you ascended the throne. In other words, well, let's read English. Basically, this is the key to the whole Beshert aspect of the Megillah. That yes, God is hidden, but as we know, the way things unfold is we see the incredible hand of God in everything. How all of this, that Esther's position is only so that she can help her people. So let's read. This is Mordecai speaking to Esther, where he says, you know, if you don't stand up, then someone else will do it. You know, don't think. There's a phrase that there's that God, Habesh Luchim L'Makam. God has many agents to do things, right? And there's many paths of salvation. So don't think that you are the only person that can do it. So, who'd like to read that?
I will, Rabbi.
Go for it.
On the contrary, if you keep silent in this crisis, relief and deliverance will come to the Jews from another quarter, while you and your father's house will perish. And who knows, perhaps you have attained to royal position for just such a crisis.
Right. So we know Mordecai was a pious Jew. So this is what he says to Esther. He says, even though, yeah,
Rabbi, ask a question again, please.
yeah.
Why again are the Jews being persecuted again by Haman? If you could remind me, why is it always the Jewish people?
Well, why is it always the Jews? So there's a few reasons. First of all, there was history there with Haman and Mordecai, which didn't help matters. But besides for that, we know because Haman says it. He says there's a people and they live amongst us and they have different customs and they have different practices and they look different and they act different. So what is known nowadays, it's even become a verb of othering. They call it nowadays. When you make someone out to be the other, they're different from you. There's always fear of the other, basically. So, I mean, there's all kinds of spiritual explanations. It's God's will and all the rest of it. But on a simple level, Haman says, he says, there's these Jews and, they won't bow down to me. They have different customs and practices. They wear different clothes. They speak a different language. They're not like us. They're foreigners, and that's a reason that he gives.
It happens in the animal world as well. An albino animal will be attacked by the others of its kind because it's different. Yeah. If a canary or a budgerigar escapes into the garden and meets a flock of sparrows, the sparrows will attack the budgie because it's different.
Yeah,
it's a lot of things. In some ways, we're very like the animals. We don't like the things that are different.
Can I throw something in?
Yeah.
Yes, Julian.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, obviously there are reasons why Haman wanted to destroy the Jews, but one thing to bear in mind is that the Persian Empire, which at the time was the largest empire that the world had ever known, and probably maybe was always the largest empire in that whole era, was because the Persian Empire deliberately tolerated diversity. It had an empire which stretched all the way from beyond Turkey into Europe, down into Africa to Kush, right the way through to India. It was absolutely massive. And one of the things in the Megillah is that when messages are sent out to all parts of the kingdom, they're all done in the different languages pertaining to those areas. So that the whole of the Persian system was based on this acceptance of diversity rather than imposing one Persian will. So it's just an aspect to throw in there.
Yeah.
So what are you saying, Julian? I don't understand.
So what I'm saying is, although Haman was saying, here's this other people who are different, that was him. It is, I think, unusual that Ahasuerus would accept that argument, given that his whole rule and raison d'etre and modus operandi, it was based on accepting diversity. It's an interesting point.
They wouldn't bow down to them.
But basically, it's the same old story, to persecute the Jewish people, really, for hardly any reason, really, isn't it? Really, so I presume.
Bowing down is the only thing I can think of.
But they liked maybe that their behaviour was such that it didn't please the people who were in charge, and therefore, if you have people who rebel, you look at Myanmar people now. People don't follow the rules, you will want to quash them. And so if the Jews decided to keep themselves to themselves and not integrate or participate in the laws of the land, then they were a sitting target, I suppose.
Or they could have become quite powerful because obviously a lot of, in times gone by, Jews were money lenders, doctors, that type of thing, and maybe he felt threatened that they were becoming too powerful within the community, the nation.
Well, also, I mean, we have laws against discrimination and such like, but that doesn't stop people still being anti-Semitic. even though the laws of the country are against such things, racism and such like, but it's still people are racist.
I think the
And
rabbi's
perhaps
gone.
the Persian Empire was the same. The laws said that people could be different, but that's
Sorry,
still
that's the second time I've been
people
thrown
were
out of
still
my own
racist.
meeting.
Yeah, you've
Sorry.
won.
Sounded like Julian covered that very well. Sorry, I got thrown out of my own meeting again.
Because you're different, Rabbi.
Yeah, I know. Right, who saw this picture? That social media. 1 second. King again. Can you see?
You mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Son at work.
So right. So I
Original parts of England would have spent only 60 days.
You've gone again.
befriended, or a guy befriended me who's a photographer for Getty. They ended up on the Getty image bank. So he came back.
You
We keep losing you, Rabbi.
And he wants to take some pictures of to his Yisrael. So he took this picture of Yisrael at his desk, which ended up, I don't read the
You've gone again.
sun, by the way, but actually Ivor sent it to me. Were we frozen?
Rabbi, you keep freezing and we lost half of what you were saying. Gone again. Oh dear.
Okay, 1 sec. 1 sec. I'll give it a minute to recover. Okay, am I back?
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Oh. Okay, if it carries on, I'll go on my, I'll go on my phone, possibly. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry. Joys of technology. Okay. They've told me I can have an internet upgrade, but not till March 17th after lockdown. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
No? Okay, 1 sec. Oh, good. Okay. I'm going to just log in on my phone because this is ridiculous. Just 1 second.
Okay, can everyone hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, goody. Right. Okay, I'm going to mute my other one because it's frozen completely.
Smelt nice.
Okay. Can everyone hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
1 sec.
Yeah.
Okay, so this picture, oh, it's not very large. It's not very large.
Big enough.
See it.
We're speaking of.
Okay,
We can
so
see it.
in that picture you will see.
So in that picture you will see.
You see
You
the
see
Srolik.
Srolik.
Is that Rich Relic?
Yeah.
Lots of feedback.
Yeah, I'm trying to mute my other one, but it's frozen. Just give me a moment. I'm ready to throw something at it.
Is that George Israelic?
Yes.
I didn't recognize him.
It's definitely him.
Tall and skinny. Taller and skinny.
Okay, I think I'm closing Zoom on my computer.
Zoom might look. Oh. Sorry, 1 sec. Oh. Sorry.
What was that?
Hooray.
Oh, okay, I got it.
So my computer's going mad today. Okay, so this picture was taken by a photographer who works for Getty Images. It ended up on their image bank and it ended up in the Sun. Right? It's a picture of a child doing online school, right? Who happens to be Jewish. Right? You would think that was fairly innocuous. You would not believe, unless you saw my Facebook post, the comments on the bottom. This is not a typical English child for obvious reasons. Why did they choose a Jewish child? This is not representative of the English community. Oh, didn't you know the Jews run this country, etc., etc., which is really sad. Why? Because the child has a yarmulke. If he didn't have a yarmulke, nobody would have
But
said
you
a
can
word.
hardly see it.
Well,
They notice it.
How on
Anyway.
earth did people see that? I couldn't have seen that.
Well, I
Right.
did straight away.
I actually found it.
Princes as well.
I found it tragic, but also hilarious that they think there's a whole conspiracy because they showed a Jewish child. Meanwhile, unless the son did it to be provocative, I don't think they did. It's completely coincidental. It just happened to be a file picture.
Well,
But
why,
people
did they
get
have it? Why did they have this picture, and why did they ask for permission?
well, the official explanation is they searched on Getty Images for a homeschool picture, and this came up because it was on there. Why
Right.
shouldn't you show your child doing homeschool, right? But this is the point. When you are the other, when you're different, people panic and they attack you. So it's been going on since time immemorial. It's very sad. What can I tell
Do
you?
you think
Anyway.
that had been a Muslim child, that would have
They
been
would have said exactly the same thing.
right? And if it had been a poor child, a child who does not have all that technology, would it have been a different comment? As a child who can't do his schoolwork or her schoolwork because they don't have the facilities, would it have got comments about how?
No, it's a good question. And the truth is, you know, the kind of people that comment on articles on the Sun are hardly representative of society. But my point is,
or are they?
the only thing, well, they are representative of a certain part of society. But the only thing about that picture is it shows a child who's obviously different. If you notice the yarmulke.
It also shows a child who comes from a relatively well-off home.
Okay.
Well, okay.
Well, they
That
asked
wasn't
if
the-
they've
if
asked
somebody-
for homeschooling. So what do they want? Somebody sitting in the cellar or something?
No, but the point.
Well, but the point is, but Jewish kids are also part. But Jews, you would say that's ridiculous. We're citizens of this country, but people don't see us that way. They see us as different. If you read the comments, which I don't recommend you doing, it's not, oh, this child seems to be okay. He's got the internet. What about children who don't? It's Jew, basically. Anyway, my point was, it's very sad.
You mean things haven't changed?
When somebody said, you know, I don't know if you've ever been in the kosher aisle in a supermarket where someone's taken the trouble to put a bacon sandwich. It happens quite a lot, evidently. People think it's accidental, but it's a thing that people do. So I'm slightly amused that someone who's a bit anti-Jewish goes to all the trouble of going to find a bacon pie or pork pie or whatever, and then has to go all the way to the kosher aisle just to put it there, just to wind me up. So I was, on the one hand, I was very saddened by the comments on this article. On the other hand, as I said, it gave me a bit of a kick to think that you can start a conspiracy theory just by using a file photo, because people are so, you know, paranoid about the other. And Haman was exactly the same, right? And Paro as well, if you recall. The Jews, the foreigners, they're taking over. So, this is the key line here. Who knows, perhaps the reason you reach this position is precisely because it's all the hashgacha pratis, it's bashert, that you'll be in the right place at the right time. Sometimes God's call is overt, sometimes it is covert. In the Megillah, it's very much covert, but it's still there. And this is the key line. You know, it's not chance. It's happened for a reason. We find at the beginning of Vayikra, now we mentioned this, I think, last week, that there's always the danger that we say to ourselves that I did this on my own, and we don't acknowledge the hand of God. There's always that danger. I think we quoted this last week. We said this is the root of a lot of Israeli politics, that it's not your power and your might that achieves things. It is God's blessing, etc. On the one hand. On the other hand, I'm just whizzing through these quickly. So, the beginning of Vayikra, it says God called to Moshe, and if you look there, the Aleph is small. In the Torah, the Aleph is small as well. Okay, so we're going to look at 3 reasons why the Aleph is small, and then we're going to tie this back to the Megillah. Okay, so I've just gone a little bit quickly because we're running out of time. So here, Vayikra al Moshe, God called to Moshe. Okay, with a small Aleph. Why is the Aleph small? So who would like to read the first explanation there?
I'll read.
Go for it.
What is the difference between the prophets of Israel and the prophets of the pagan nations of the world? Rabbi Haman ben Hanina said, the Holy One, blessed be he, reveals himself to the pagan nations by an incomplete form of a dress.
I've got no problem. The rabbi's got problems.
Deb, can you mute?
Sorry.
And the Lord appeared to Bilam, whereas the prophets of Israel, he appears in a complete form of address, as it is said, and he called to Moses.
Now, just to clarify, in Hebrew, it says Vayikar Hashem el Bilam, which means he kind of happened upon Bilam. Like Makoreh, you say in Hebrew, what's happening? What's going on? A mikra is an occurrence, but likro is to call someone or to read. So when God comes to Bilam, he just happens upon him, sort of very kind of dismissively. Whereas when God calls to Moshe, he actually calls him. With a small aleph, we'll see why in a minute. Right, okay. Number 8, who would like to read that?
Shall I read?
Yeah.
All God's communications to Moses, whether they use the words speak or say or command, were preceded by a call, Korea, which is a term of endearment used by the angels when they address one another. As it is said, and one called to the other, V'kara zeh el zeh, from Isaiah.
Like that, right?
Yeah. However, to the prophets of the nations of the world, his appearance is described by an expression signifying a casual encounter and uncleanness, as it says, and the Lord appeared to Bilam.
It's the same point. So God just appeared to Bilam, he happened. That's a bad translation. A bad translation would be he happened upon Bilam in passing, sort of thing, backhanded. Whereas with Moshe, he calls him. So the question is, why is the aleph small? So the Balaturim says, I just want to cover it very quickly, that the small aleph was because of his humility. But there's another explanation. Let's have a look at 1 Kings 19, verse 12. Who would like to read this? Who hasn't read yet? Anyone?
I can do it.
Again, if you like.
Yeah?
Deborah hasn't read.
Right. After the
Deborah?
earthquake, fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still small voice. A still small.
Right, right. The Hebrew for that is Kol Demama Daka, right? V'shofar gadol yitaka. Right. With a Kol Demama Daka, the still small voice. It's actually spoken about in Tanakh. The Lord was not in the fire, but a still small voice. And here is the thing about the small aleph, and here's the thing about the Megillah. The small aleph of Vayikra, we're told, is because whilst God may call us, sometimes it's a small voice, it's hard to hear. It's not always in your face. The Megillah is very much about that. It's not the overt, clear call of God. It's the behind the scenes hand of God, but you don't see it explicitly. Sometimes it's harder to hear that voice, but it's still there. When Mordechai says to Esther, maybe this is the reason that you became queen, he's basically saying this is all hashgacha pratis. This is all God's way of doing things, but it's all behind the scenes. It's that small aleph. Why is Vayikra a small aleph? Because God doesn't always call you loud and clear so you can hear. Sometimes it's the small, quiet voice, right? Sometimes it's the shofar gadol, the big blast, but sometimes it's the small voice, and it's not always so easy to hear. Oops, there we go, that's it. And therein lies the challenge. So sometimes when we're very fortunate, we have like the splitting of the sea or Matan Torah, we have the big blasting voice of God. And there are other times it's a much quieter voice. And Esther is all about, the name is about concealment. It's one of those times. It's tough in Galut. It's tough in exile. Purim is a Yom Tov of exile. It's a Yom Tov of destruction where we are threatened with existential destruction. And we know it says in the Megillah, that night the king woke up from sleep, and the commentaries say it's an allusion to God, that God woke up and started doing something. But often that is how we see Hashem in this world, unfortunately.
How does that relate to today, perhaps, or how might it relate to the situations that we're in today with this worldwide pandemic?
It's very much the same, that we don't see the clear call of God and the overt effect of God. And if anything, we often ponder, as it said, there'll come a time when you suffer and you'll say, where is God? I don't see him. Surely people say that nowadays. It's interesting. They did a survey in America that people become more religious through the pandemic and connected more with religion. I'm not sure that's true across all society. I could see that. The one thing that's clear, no matter what side of the equation you're on, religious, secular, you believe God punishes us or you believe he rewards us, one thing is sure is that the whole whole order of society and the Seder, if you like, of things can be changed if Hashem wanted to. If I would have told you last year that no one's going to be traveling, you would have said, you're nuts. People travel every day. If I would have told you last year that, no one's going to be shaking hands with people, you would say, what are you talking about? If I would have said to you last year that, the Olympics is going to be cancelled, well, the Olympics cancelled. Never, even in World War II, the Olympics were still going on, So, if God wants something to happen, it happens, but it's all concealed. It's not overt. We don't hear this cry of God. So that's what the Megillah is about, but it's still very powerful. And I guess the message to us is that we should realize, just like Esther, that wherever you find yourself, that is the place that you are supposed to be. And that is Besheret. And your job is to make the most of your mission. And the challenge is identifying your mission, because God doesn't always call you with a clear voice. So a person sometimes says, I don't understand why. I think I told this story before. There's a chap called Julian Verboff, who's a professor of dermatology, I think, at somewhere in Liverpool. And he became president of the Merseyside Jewish Rep Council. And he always said to me, I don't know why I did this. I've got enough on my plate. I really don't need it. I've done it before. I know why I agreed to this. Anyway, we were at the Remembrance Day service. And I remember because it was a surreal thing. 11 o'clock. We were standing in St. George's Hall, which has about, I think, 50 steps going up to the hall. And it was the most surreal thing. We're in the Remembrance Day service, 2-minute silence, whatever it is. And during the silence, suddenly we heard an awful kind of crash. And there was a chap who was one of the cadets who was standing to attention, and he'd collapsed, basically. And not only did he collapse, he fainted, but he rolled down the steps like a slinky. It was horrendous. And he hit his head or whatever. Anyway, Professor Verboff, the highly qualified medic, went over and basically saved his life. I said to him afterwards, I said, now you know why you became president of the Red Council, because otherwise you wouldn't have been at that event. So, sometimes it's things like that we don't overtly see. Life would be much easier if God gave you a mission, and you could take it, but it's not always that way. But the challenge is to always look for, in the challenges that we find and the situations that we find ourselves, to say, why am I in this? I'm in this position because obviously this is where I'm supposed to be right now. The proof is I'm there. So a religious Jew says, if I'm at home right now and not davening with a minion, that's because this is where I'm supposed to be. If I'm stuck in some country somewhere because of quarantine, which I didn't plan to be in, that's also because this is where I have to be right now. I don't understand why, but I know that God has a plan. So that's what Mordechai says to Esther. It's all part of God's plan. It's and know also that if you don't do your mission, someone else will do it. The world doesn't depend on you to do your mission, but you should have the merit of doing your mission. The challenge is figuring out what your mission is.
Rabbi, Mordechai knew this because that's why he put her up for this beauty contest.
Okay, so did he know explicitly? Did he know implicitly? Moshe Aarons, when he was defense minister, once came to visit the Lubavitcher Rebbe in New York, and he was supposed to take a certain flight back, and the Rebbe sent a message saying that he mustn't take the flight. And eventually he didn't, and something happened. I think the plane crashed. It's a famous story. And he went to the Rebbe afterwards and said, you could have prevented a disaster. Why didn't you just tell me? And the Rebbe said, I didn't know what was going to happen. I just had a sense that I have to get a message to you that you must not do this. I didn't have all the information. So if you are a person who, God talks to in that way, I don't know if Mordechai knew exactly what was going to happen, or if he just had a premonition, or he had a sense of what was needed. I don't know if when he put Esther up for being queen, he knew that she was going to have to explicitly save her people. I don't know. We're not told that God spoke to him in any way. Sometimes you do things, you don't understand why you're doing it. And later on you say, now I realize why I did that, because it was all part of God's plan. So the answer is, it's not always black and white. And even when you're carrying out God's plan, sometimes you don't even realize it yourself. So the challenge is, the lesson from Megillah is that everywhere we find ourselves, every situation we're there for a reason, to make a difference. Sometimes that difference can be to save the Jewish people. Sometimes it can be on a much more mundane level. We should never, nothing is by chance. God comes to Bilam by chance. He doesn't come to Moshe by chance. He calls him. So God calls to us as well. So whatever challenges we find ourselves in, we should know that God's calling us, and that we can always make the best of our situation. There's always something we can do to leave our mark, our mission, even if it's on a small scale. My apologies. I have to, yeah.
And I don't know if you've got time. I just had I contacted Michael about the walled cities, Have you got time for me to say what he said?
Yeah, yeah, please. Yeah.
So, he said that that Shushan Purim is only for walled cities from the time of Joshua, and
Right.
although where he lives, like Arnona, was not
Yeah.
within the wall of Joshua, it was not within the walls then, because they go by the modern boundaries, like you suggested.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And
It would be
apparently
impossible otherwise.
apparently there's a question with regard to Ramot, which is
Oh, there we go. I
periphery
mentioned that. Right.
of Jerusalem.
I mean, you have this with boundaries for things like
Where he
Shmita.
lives, it's included.
Right. So you have also this question for things like Shmita. What defines the land of Israel? So, of course, at various times they used to get stuff from Gaza because Gaza wasn't part of the biblical land of Israel. Although, interestingly, it is mentioned. Sorry?
Thank you.
Okay, I'm really sorry. I've got to get to another meeting, so I'm going to disappear. Welcome to Keep Chat. Oh, I'm muted. Wait, what's going on? Oh, I'm on the wrong device. Sorry. Let's try again. Right, I'm on this device. Right. I'm sorry. I've got to disappear to a meeting, so please excuse me. Have a lovely Purim, everyone.
Thank you.
Yes,
Rabbi.
thank
see
you.
you at some point.
You as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye-bye.
Sally, I will send you the PowerPoint.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
I'll bring the book over to you soon. Okay, Sally.
Okay, I've got to go out. I'm going to Hendon and then to Stanmore Hospital, but Phil's home. Otherwise,
Okay.
I'll just leave it in the porch. Thank you very much.
Okay. Lovely. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Happy